Friends, citizens, is this infernal device truly working? If you're receiving this strange echo, consider yourselves part of my final and most important audience. You're tuned in to the Gadfly's Final Buzz, broadcasting live, or more accurately, philosophizing live, from the very unjust yet very theatrical courthouse of Athens, in the year of our Lord 399 BCE. My name is Socrates, and if the sheer, impossible audacity of this trans-dimensional broadcast from a man on trial for his life doesn't compel you to immediately smash that subscribe button and commit to pursuing truth, then frankly, your mind is as lazy as my accusers. Do it now, before I'm sentenced to death for corrupting your minds. And tell me, if this peculiar connection holds, from what strange, unexamined corner of your world are you listening? What year has logic decreed for you? And what hour do these final sober tidings reach you? We're taking notes for posterity. Now ask yourself a hard question, and let us begin the final discourse. Welcome, seekers of reason, to a broadcast from the very edge of absurdity. We are in Athens, in the year 399 before the Common Era. The air in the dikasterion is thick, not with the noble pursuit of justice, but with the stench of personal vendettas masquerading as piety. Before a jury of 501 citizens, none of whom seem particularly thrilled to be here, stands Socrates. He is charged, and you must not try to laugh, with impiety and the corruption of our city's youth. It is a spectacle that would be hilarious if it weren't so tragically serious. The fate of philosophy's most infamous gadfly hangs in the balance, threatened by the delicate egos of lesser men. Let us first examine the charge of impiety, a claim so thin it is transparent. Anytus, the lead accuser, a man whose poetic ambitions far exceed his talent, proclaims that Socrates fails to acknowledge the gods of Athens, introducing new divinities of his own. The irony is richer than a Persian tapestry. Socrates, who speaks of his daimonion, a divine sign, a guiding spirit that warns him against error, is accused of godlessness by men who use the gods as a convenient shield for their own political machinations. This is not about faith, it is about forcing conformity. It is a demand that a man's inner world be subject to public approval, a notion Socrates finds, quite rightly, laughable. The real gods Meletus, Anytus, and Lycon worship are power, influence, and reputation. Anytus, a powerful politician, is still smarting from Socrates' habit of publicly demonstrating that statesmen often know nothing of the virtues they claim to champion. Lycon, a rhetorician, resents a philosopher who values truth over persuasive empty words. Their prosecution is not a defense of Olympus, it is the revenge of the establishment. They accuse Socrates of turning away from the gods, when in fact he has merely turned a mirror upon them, and they are horrified by the vacuous reflection they see. The trial is their attempt to shatter that mirror. Then we have the second, more theatrical accusation, corrupting the youth. Socrates' response to this, overheard just moments ago, was a masterpiece of dry wit. They accuse me of corrupting the youth. Ha! As if the youth of Athens weren't already perfectly capable of corrupting themselves. My only crime, it seems, was teaching them to think for themselves, a dangerous habit that, apparently. The charge is a confession of fear.
The powerful men of Athens are terrified, not that their sons will become wicked, but that they will become inquisitive. They fear their children will start asking the same uncomfortable questions Socrates has been posing for decades. What does this Socratic corruption look like in practice? It is the act of questioning everything. It is the dismantling of inherited beliefs to see if they can withstand the pressure of logic. The supposed victims of this intellectual crime are the brightest young men in the city, sons of the elite, who find the marketplace interrogations far more stimulating than their fathers' predictable pronouncements. Socrates does not hand them answers. He infects them with the desire to find their own. For a society built on tradition and unquestioning obedience, this is not education, it is sedition. Consider the so-called corrupted. We see Plato in the crowd, his mind alight with the fire his master has kindled. We see Xenophon. These are not degenerates, they are the future of Hellenic thought. The prosecution argues that Socrates' influence led to the treason of figures like Alcibiades, a convenient but dishonest oversimplification. They blame the teacher for the student's ambition, ignoring the simple fact that Socrates teaches one thing above all: self-knowledge. If a man knows himself and still chooses a dark path, is the fault with the one who encouraged him to look inward? The accusers think so, as it absolves them of their own failures. This trial, then, is a comedy of errors, a farce staged to eliminate a public nuisance. Socrates is not on trial for any genuine crime against the state or the heavens. He is on trial for being annoying. He is on trial for his intellectual honesty, for his refusal to flatter, and for his relentless exposure of ignorance in high places. The charges of impiety and corruption are merely the legalistic cloaks thrown over a dagger of resentment. Athens, still recovering from its humiliating defeat in the Peloponnesian War, needs a scapegoat, and the strange, barefoot philosopher is the perfect candidate. This entire proceeding is an insult to the logic that Socrates himself champions. It is a chilling reminder that the voice of reason can be drowned out by the clamor of the mob, egged on by the insecure and the powerful. If this glimpse into a trial where thinking itself is the crime has intrigued you, if you believe that questioning authority is not a flaw but a duty, then join our cause. Do not let reason be condemned to silence. Honor our pursuit of logic by subscribing now and ensure the philosopher's broadcast never fades away.
The proceedings have now shifted. The initial storm of accusations, a pathetic tempest of bruised egos and political maneuvering, has subsided. Now the old man speaks for himself. Not in defense, you understand, for Socrates does not deign to defend himself against such flimsy charges. No, he is explaining himself. He is laying bare the very core of his existence, the reason he has spent a lifetime being Athens' most beloved and hated public spectacle. The jury shuffles, impatient. They came for a legal argument, perhaps a plea for mercy. Instead, they are getting a philosophy lesson. The air is electric with their misunderstanding. They ask him, through the mouth of Anytus, why he persists. Why, at 70 years old, does he not retreat into a quiet life? Why must he wander the agora, accosting generals, poets, and politicians, peeling back their layers of self-importance until nothing but quivering ignorance remains? He looks at them, a faint, almost pitying smile on his face. He explains that this life was not a choice in the way a man chooses his trade. It was a duty, a sacred mission assigned to him, and it is the only life worth living. For Socrates, a life without this constant nagging examination is no life at all. His voice, steady and clear, begins a story that many here have heard in pieces, but never with such grave context. It begins not in the marketplace, but at the holiest of sites, the oracle at Delphi. His excitable friend, Chaerephon, now deceased, once travelled to that sacred place and dared to ask the Pythia a question. He asked if any man was wiser than Socrates. The priestess, the very voice of the god Apollo, gave a clear answer. No, no man was wiser. A pronouncement that would have filled any other Athenian with insufferable pride. But Socrates is not any other Athenian. He was thrown into confusion, a state of profound perplexity. How could this be? He was acutely, painfully aware of his own ignorance. He knew nothing of real worth. The god could not be lying, for that is not in the nature of a god, yet the statement seemed impossible. So began his quest, his life's work. It was not a quest to prove the oracle right, but a desperate, pious attempt to prove the god wrong. A divine comedy of errors, with his own soul as the punchline. He resolved to find a man wiser than himself. If he could just find one, he could go back to the god, in spirit at least, and present his refutation. Here, he could say, is a man wiser than I, yet you claimed I was the wisest. So he began his rounds. He approached a prominent politician, a man lauded by many, and most importantly by himself, for his great wisdom. Socrates engaged him in conversation, asking simple questions about the nature of justice and virtue, concepts the politician spoke of with great authority. The result was a disaster for the politician. Under the gentle pressure of Socratic inquiry, the man's wisdom unraveled. He contradicted himself. He grew flustered, then angry. It became clear that he did not know the things he claimed to know. Socrates left the encounter with a heavy heart and a dawning realization. Well, he thought, I am wiser than that man, for he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I, on the other hand, neither know nor think that I know. This small, miserable sliver of self-awareness was his only advantage. And so it continued. He went to the poets, the creators of grand epics and beautiful odes. He asked them to explain the meaning of their own finest passages. Surely they must possess a deep well of wisdom to produce such works. Yet they could not. They spoke, it seemed, not from knowledge, but from a kind of instinct or divine inspiration, like prophets or soothsayers, understanding nothing of what they said. They were vessels, not sources. And worse, on the strength of their poetry, they believed themselves to be wise in all other matters, a fatal intellectual flaw. He found the same pattern again and again. Each man he questioned who had a reputation for wisdom was found wanting. His attempt to prove the god a liar only served to confirm the oracle's strange pronouncement. With each statesman he embarrassed, with each poet he flummoxed, the truth became clearer and his reputation more toxic. The men he exposed were left humiliated and resentful. They could not attack his logic, so they attacked his character. This, he explains to the jury, is the true origin of the slander against him. It is the long simmering grudge of the intellectually naked. His wisdom, he confesses to the court, is a worthless sort of wisdom. It is simply this: the profound, unshakable knowledge of his own ignorance. When the god said no man was wiser, he might have meant that human wisdom is, at its peak, nothing more than recognizing its severe limitations.
Socrates became the living embodiment of that message, a walking, talking reminder of human fallibility. A city full of men who believe themselves to be experts in all things does not take kindly to such a reminder. This is when he delivers the analogy that seals his fate. He looks at the jury, at the city of Athens he claims to love, and explains his purpose. They ask why I do it, why I pester everyone with questions. I tell them it is because of the divine command. My purpose is to be a gadfly to the great horse that is Athens, a very annoying but very necessary pest. The horse, it seems, wishes to swat me. The image is perfect. Athens is a great and noble steed, but it has grown lazy, sluggish, and complacent. It needs to be roused. His questions are the sting. His constant presence in the agora is the irritating buzz. He is the pest sent by the god to keep the state from falling into a deep, unthinking slumber. He admits it is an annoying role. He knows they want him gone, but he argues that his service, this divine annoyance, is the greatest good he could possibly do for them. To kill him would be to swap the gadfly, after which the horse might sleep for the rest of its days, undisturbed and unproductive. They would be harming themselves more than him. Here lies the philosophical core of his entire existence, a phrase that will echo through the centuries long after this courthouse has crumbled to dust. He tells the jury, with no hint of melodrama, that he cannot and will not stop for one simple reason. The unexamined life is not worth living. This is not a clever turn of phrase, it is the foundation of his soul. For a human being gifted with the capacity for reason and reflection, to go through life without ever stopping to ask why, this is a betrayal of our very nature. What is a life lived without examination? It is a life of base instinct and inherited prejudice. It is accepting slogans as truths and traditions as virtues without ever interrogating them. It is sleepwalking from birth to death. This existence, he argues, is fit for cattle, but not for a citizen of Athens, not for a human being. To live is to think. To truly live is to think about how one lives. This daily discussion of virtue, this relentless questioning, is not a hobby. It is the vital activity that gives human life its meaning and its worth. Therefore, he cannot accept their terms. If they were to say to him, "Socrates, we will let you go, but on one condition, that you no longer spend your time in this inquiry or in philosophy," he would refuse. He had to. He tells them plainly, "Man of Athens, I honor and love you, but I shall obey the god rather than you." His loyalty is not to the comfort of the state, but to the health of its citizens' souls and his own. To be silent would be to disobey the divine command that set him on this path. He sees his mission as a form of care, a peculiar and irritating form of care, but care nonetheless. While other men busy themselves with acquiring wealth, political power, or public honors, he has dedicated himself to accosting them in public and asking them if they are not ashamed to care so much for money and reputation while giving no thought or...
Let us now, you and I, pull back the curtain. Let us dismiss the solemn legal theater for a moment and look at the grubby machinery operating backstage. The charges brought against Socrates, impiety and corrupting the youth, are a fiction, a useful, pious-sounding fiction designed for public consumption. To understand the true reason this 70-year-old man is on trial for his life, you must not look at the indictment. You must look at the accusers. You must look at the long list of powerful men whose pride he has wounded over the decades. This is not a trial, it is a vendetta. The entire prosecution is an edifice built upon the foundations of resentment. The city of Athens is not genuinely concerned that its gods are being neglected, or that its youth are being led astray. The city's elite are concerned that their authority is being questioned, and their ignorance is being exposed, not in private whispers, but in the bright, unforgiving sunlight of the agora. This proceeding is the culmination of 1,000 tiny humiliations, 1,000 moments where Socrates calmly and publicly revealed a so-called expert to be a hollow vessel. It is the revenge of the establishment. Socrates himself understands this with perfect tragic clarity. I overheard his dry summation of his prosecutors just before the trial began. My accusers, a politician with a bruised ego, a poet who couldn't explain his own verses, and a rhetorician who hated my simple questions. It's not about the gods. It's about a very public, very embarrassing loss of face. For them, not for me. In that single statement, he peels away the legalistic veneer and exposes the raw, pulsating nerve of human vanity that is driving this entire spectacle. This is not about justice. It is about payback. Let us dissect this triumvirate of indignation, starting with the lead prosecutor, Anytus. Here is a man of considerable influence, a wealthy tanner who was instrumental in restoring democracy after the reign of the 30 tyrants. He sees himself as a pillar of the community, a statesman of great virtue and practical wisdom. He is precisely the sort of man Socrates loves to engage in conversation, and by engage I mean intellectually disembowel. Anytus represents the anger of the politicians, the men of action who believe they run the world. Imagine the scene, repeated in various forms over the years. Anytus is holding court in the marketplace, pontificating on the nature of good governance. Socrates ambles over, barefoot and unassuming, and begins to ask his simple questions. Anytus, you are a great leader. Can you tell me, what is virtue? How do you teach it? Anytus, confident in his own importance, offers a conventional answer. Socrates gently points out a contradiction. Anytus tries again. Socrates reveals another. Soon the great statesman is tied in logical knots, sputtering in frustration before a growing crowd of smirking young men. Among those young men, it is whispered, was Anytus' own son. Socrates did not just reveal Anytus's ignorance to strangers. He may have revealed it to the one person whose respect Anytus craved above all else. The Socratic method did not just challenge his political authority, it undermined his paternal authority. The charge of corrupting the youth is not a public service. It is a father's bitter cry of revenge against the man who, in his eyes, stole his son's admiration by showing the boy that his father was an intellectual fraud. Anytus carries the grudge of every politician who has ever been made to look foolish by a philosopher's simple demand for clarity. They trade in rhetoric, in grand gestures and emotional appeals. Socrates trades in logic, a currency that debases their entire political enterprise. He has shown time and time again that the men who steer the ship of state often have no idea how to read a map, let alone understand the stars. Anytus is here to ensure that this inconvenient truth-teller is finally silenced for the good of his own ego. Next in our gallery of the aggrieved is Meleatus. He is the face of the prosecution, the one who officially filed the charges. He fancies himself a poet, though few can recall any of his verses. He represents the fury of the artists. When Socrates interrogated the poets, he concluded that they created their beautiful works not from wisdom or understanding, but from a sort of divine madness, like soothsayers. They were merely channels, not intelligent creators. To a man who prides himself on his craft, this is a profound insult. Anytus is the living embodiment of this poetic indignation. He puts his name to the charge of impiety, claiming Socrates introduces new gods. This is a desperate attempt to reclaim the spiritual high ground. Anytus, the poet, who speaks in the language of the gods, is trying to legislate his own spiritual authority over Socrates, the philosopher who calmly bisected that authority by asking him to explain what his pretty words actually meant. Anytus cannot defeat Socrates in an argument, so he has enlisted the power of the state to do it for him. His role is that of a religious zealot, but his motivation is professional jealousy. He is the gatekeeper of the divine, a self-appointed position, and Socrates has been picking the lock for years with his relentless questions. The charge of impiety is a smokescreen. The real crime, in Anytus's eyes, is that Socrates has exposed that the emperor of verse has no clothes, that his poetic pronouncements are often as empty as they are elegant. This trial is his critical review of the Socratic method. Then we have the third man, Lycon. He is a rhetorician, a professional orator who makes his living teaching others the art of persuasive speech. He represents the animosity of the Sophists and the professional educators of Athens. These men sold their wisdom for a hefty fee, promising to teach the sons of the wealthy how to succeed in public life through masterful speaking. They were the original consultants, and business was good. Socrates, however, was a threat to their entire business model. He offered a competing product, the pursuit of truth, and he gave it away for free. His method, the elenchus, with its short, sharp questions and demand for honesty, was the complete opposite of the long, flowery, and often deceptive speeches taught by men like Lycon. He did not teach how to win an argument. He taught how to discover if you had any right to be arguing in the first place. He was not just an intellectual rival, he was a commercial threat. Every time Socrates demonstrated that a skilled speaker could be utterly ignorant of his subject matter, he devalued the product that Lycon and his colleagues were selling. He showed the youth of Athens that there was a difference between sounding smart and being wise. Lycon's presence in the prosecution is the guild protecting its turf. It is a lawsuit disguised as a criminal trial, an attempt to eliminate a competitor who was undercutting their prices and, more damningly, exposing the shoddy quality of their wares. These three men, the politician, the poet, and the rhetorician, are not random citizens. They are the avatars of the three most powerful groups Socrates had spent his life interrogating. They are the living proof of his own defense. The animosity against him is not popular, it is professional. It comes from those with a vested interest in public ignorance, from those whose reputations and livelihoods depend on no one asking the kinds of questions Socrates asks every day. The political climate of Athens has made it possible for this personal vendetta to become a state-sponsored execution. The city is still reeling from the disastrous Peloponnesian War. The brief bloody rule of the 30 tyrants, a brutal oligarchy, is a fresh and painful memory. The restored democracy is fragile, paranoid, and defensive. It is a body politic suffering from a severe autoimmune disorder, attacking its own cells. Socrates' associations have not helped him. Men like Critias and Alcibiades, infamous for their roles in Athens' downfall, had been in his circle. It is a classic case of guilt by association, a convenient excuse for those who already hated him for other reasons. They can now paint him as an anti-democratic, corrupting influence, a threat to the fragile state. Anytus, the democratic hero, can frame his personal grudge as a patriotic act.
Look now, not at the defendant, nor at his accusers, but at the arbiters of this farce. Look at the jury. In Athens, we have no single sober judge robed in wisdom. Instead, we have this: 501 men, 501 citizens, chosen by lot, crammed onto wooden benches under the Attic sun. They are farmers, potters, merchants, and shipwrights. They are the raw, unfiltered will of the people, and they are about to decide the fate of the West's greatest mind. This is not a tribunal, this is an audience, and they are waiting for a show. The system is called the dikasterion, a cornerstone of our radical democracy. The ideal is noble. Justice is too important to be left to the elite, so it is placed directly into the hands of the demos. There are no professional lawyers to argue, no learned judge to interpret the law. There is only a water clock to time the speeches and the casting of bronze ballots. It is a system designed to be immune to the corruption of the few, but it has proven terrifyingly susceptible to the ignorance of the many. Today, that susceptibility will be put to the ultimate test. Socrates stands before them, and in his eyes you can see not fear, but a quiet, almost clinical contempt. He is a surgeon, forced to explain a complex procedure to a terrified and superstitious patient. He knows they cannot possibly understand the nuances of his argument, and worse, he knows they do not want to. They have been conditioned by the rhetoricians and the playwrights to expect a certain kind of performance in this arena, and he has no intention of giving it to them. He is a philosopher, and he will speak philosophically, even if it kills him. I heard him mutter it himself, a perfect, bitter summary of his predicament. They say I'm being judged by my peers. I say I'm being judged by a mob with too much time on its hands and a bad memory for philosophy. They want a performance, a dramatic plea. I, it seems, am giving them a lecture, a fatal error, perhaps. He understands the game perfectly. He knows the rules of survival in an Athenian court, and he is choosing, quite deliberately, to break every single one of them. He is not fighting for his life. He is conducting his final and most dangerous philosophical demonstration. What do these 501 men expect? They expect what they always get. A defendant, perhaps his clothes artfully disheveled, would begin by flattering them, praising their legendary wisdom and fairness. He would have hired a professional speechwriter, a logograph, to craft a moving appeal full of emotional manipulation and clever half-truths. He would weep, or at least his voice would crack with feigned emotion, as he spoke of his love for the city and its cherished traditions. Most critically, he would engage in the appeal to pity. This is the grand finale of the Athenian legal drama. The defendant would parade his wife and bewildered children before the jury. The little ones, coached to look as pathetic as possible, would cling to his tunic. The wife would let out a heart-rending sob at just the right moment. The goal is simple: to make the jury feel that a conviction would not just punish a man, but destroy a family. It is emotionally potent, and it is almost always effective. Socrates will do none of this. He tells the jury to their faces that such displays are shameful.
He says that begging for his life would be a disgrace to himself, to them, and the city of Athens. It would suggest that he fears death, which he does not, and that they can be swayed by tears rather than truth, which they absolutely can. He is in effect holding up a mirror to the court and showing them the ugly, irrational face of their own judicial process. The jury, predictably, does not like what it sees. He is refusing to be a defendant. He insists on being a teacher. He is not pleading, he is explaining. This is the fatal error he spoke of. He is giving them a lesson in ethics when they are hungry for melodrama. His every word is a quiet indictment of their incompetence. His calm, logical, and sometimes condescending tone is the worst possible strategy for winning their sympathy. He is not trying to connect with them. He is trying to elevate them, and they resent him for it. Now contrast his approach with that of his accusers. Anytus and Miletus, coached by the rhetorician Lycon, have given the jury exactly what they wanted. They delivered speeches dripping with patriotic fervor and pious outrage. They spoke of the gods being mocked, of the youth being led down a path of treason and depravity. They painted Socrates not as a philosopher, but as a monster, a social disease that needed to be purged for the health of the city. Their arguments were logically weak, full of slander and innuendo, but they were emotionally powerful. They played on the city's post-war anxieties. They capped into the common man's suspicion of the intellectual elite. They were not aiming for the jury's minds, they were aiming for their guts. And in a court of 501 amateurs, the gut will always triumph over the brain. They provided a simple narrative of good versus evil and cast Socrates as the villain. Socrates, in turn, offers them only complexity and nuance. He asks them to question their own assumptions, to follow his arguments, to engage in the very kind of self-examination that makes most people profoundly uncomfortable. He is asking a mob to behave like a seminar of philosophers. The gap between his expectation and their reality is so vast it is almost comical. He is speaking a language of reason to an audience that is fluent only in the language of prejudice. Consider the psychology of this crowd. An individual man might feel the weight of responsibility in casting a vote for death. He might be swayed by a logical argument. But as part of a collective of 501, his individual responsibility is diffused. It dissolves into the will of the crowd. The mood of the room, the oratorical skill of the speaker, the shared biases of the group, these become the deciding factors. The trial becomes a test of popularity, not a test of guilt or innocence. Socrates' intellectual superiority is his greatest liability here. Every clever refutation, every calm dismantling of his accuser's points does not win him allies. It creates resentment. He is making them feel stupid. He is the strange, barefoot man who has spent a lifetime making the most powerful men in the city look like fools, and now he is doing it to the jury itself. They are no longer judging his crimes. They are judging his arrogance. And on that charge, they will find him guilty. This is the central tragedy of Athenian democracy on display. The system that empowers the common man also empowers the common man's ignorance. It creates a space where a master of rhetoric like Gorgias or a political animal like Anytus can triumph over a seeker of truth like Socrates. Truth, it turns out, is not very persuasive. It is often plain, uncomfortable, and requires effort to understand. Slander, on the other hand, is exciting, easy to grasp, and deeply satisfying. The jury is not a collection of peers in any meaningful sense. A peer of Socrates would be a philosopher capable of engaging with his arguments on their own terms. These men are not his peers, they are his subjects, the subjects of his lifelong experiment. He has been studying their souls, their beliefs, and their contradictions for decades. Now, the specimens have been gathered together and given the power to execute the scientist. What we are witnessing is a catastrophic failure of communication. Socrates is arguing from the philosophical plane, appealing to eternal truths and the demands of a rational soul. The jury is operating on the political and emotional plane. They are concerned with social stability and personal feelings. They are not even participating in the same trial. He is discussing the meaning of life, while they are deciding whether they find him annoying. The fatal error is not his, but Athens. He is offering them the greatest service a citizen can offer, an honest accounting of his own life and a call for them to do the same. He is offering them the gift of philosophy. The jury, swayed by fear and flattery, is preparing to refute.
To understand the scene unfolding here in Athens, you must first understand that Socrates is not a free agent. He is not stubborn for the sake of being difficult. He is not courting death out of some morbid desire. He believes, with every fiber of his being, that he is under orders. His entire life for the past several decades has been the fulfillment of a single, perplexing, and ultimately fatal divine command. His accusers charge him with impiety, with inventing new gods. But the truth is far more ironic. He is on trial because he is, perhaps, the most obediently pious man in all Greece. The source of this unwavering, infuriating resolve is not a complex philosophical text, but a simple story. It begins, as all important Greek stories do, at the center of the world, the sacred sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. It was there that his dear friend, the impetuous Chaerephon, approached the Pythia, the god's own priestess, while she was in her divine trance. He asked a question of monumental arrogance, the kind of question only a true friend would dare to ask. He asked if any man living was wiser than his friend Socrates. The reply from the god, spoken through the priestess, was a single, unambiguous word: no. No man was wiser than Socrates. When Chaerephon brought this news back to Athens, any other man would have swelled with pride. He would have had the oracle's words embroidered on his tunic, commissioned a statue, and spent the rest of his days dining out on the story. But Socrates is not any other man. He was thrown not into a state of joy, but into a profound confusion, what he calls aporia. He was certain of his own ignorance. How could a god who cannot lie say something so demonstrably false? This, he explains to the baffled jury, was the true beginning of his life's work. He did not accept the oracle as a compliment. He accepted it as a riddle, a divine puzzle that he, as a pious man, was obligated to solve. He felt a sacred duty to investigate the god's meaning, and the only way to do that was to attempt to refute it. He would embark on a holy quest to find a man wiser than himself, so that he could, in essence, go back to the god and point out the error. His philosophical mission began as an act of pious contradiction. Herein lies the source of all his troubles, the very heart of the animosity against him. His quest to prove the god wrong led him directly to the most powerful and respected men in Athens.
If anyone were wiser than he, surely it would be a great politician, a man entrusted with the fate of the city. So he approached a statesman, a man with a towering reputation for wisdom, and he began to ask his simple, searching questions about the nature of justice and virtue. The result was always the same. Under the gentle, relentless pressure of the Socratic method, the politician's wisdom would evaporate. His fine words were revealed to be hollow, his confident beliefs a web of contradictions. Socrates would leave the encounter more confused than ever. "I am wiser than this man," he would conclude, "for he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas I, knowing nothing, do not think that I know." His first attempt to prove the god wrong had only served to confirm the oracle's perplexing claim. Undeterred, he turned to the poets. Surely these men, who wrote such beautiful and moving verses about the gods and heroes, must possess a deep well of wisdom. He would corner them in the agora, ask them to explain the meaning of their most celebrated passages. Yet he found they could not. They spoke from a kind of inspiration, he realized, like prophets, but they had no rational understanding of the truths they channeled. Worse, their poetic talent made them believe they were experts in all other matters, revealing a double ignorance. Another failure, another powerful group alienated. Then he tried the craftsmen, the artisans. Here, at last, he found men who possessed genuine knowledge. A potter knew how to shape clay. A carpenter knew the properties of wood. But this limited practical knowledge had bred in them a terrible intellectual flaw. Because they were masters of their specific craft, they believed themselves to be wise in the most important matters of life as well. Their expertise in one area had blinded them to their vast ignorance in all others. The quest was a failure on all fronts. With every interrogation, with every public demonstration of a great man's ignorance, the oracle's pronouncement became clearer, and Socrates' position in the city became more precarious. He was not trying to humiliate these men. He was trying to learn from them. He desperately wanted one of them to be wise, to provide the solution to Apollo's riddle. But all he found was arrogant pretension. The resentment of the exposed elite began to fester and grow, a poison that has now finally led him to this courtroom. The oracle said I was the wisest, he explains to the silent, staring jury. I believed it was a riddle. My whole life has been a quest to prove the oracle wrong. I still haven't. This is not a boast. It is the tragic confession of a man who has failed at his life's only mission. He has been unable to find a single person who possesses the wisdom they claim. The only conclusion left is that the god's message was a lesson in humility. Human wisdom, at its greatest, is worth little or nothing. The wisest man is he who, like Socrates, knows that he truly knows nothing. This is the divine command. This is the truth he has been tasked to spread. His job as the gadfly of Athens is to land on his fellow citizens and sting them into an awareness of their own ignorance. He is an apostle of intellectual humility. His philosophical mission is a religious one. It is a service to the god Apollo, a service he considers more important than any business, any family matter, any political office. And so, when the jury offers him a choice, be silent or be executed, it is no choice at all. To stop practicing philosophy, to cease his questioning, would be a direct act of disobedience to the god. He tells them plainly, "Men of Athens, I will obey the god rather than you." For a man accused of impiety, it is the most pious and the most suicidal statement he could possibly make. He is choosing his commander, and it is not the state. He is trapped in a paradox of his own piety. His accusers, led by Anytus and Anytus, are using the language of religion to condemn him, but they are driven by worldly motives of pride and revenge. Socrates, meanwhile, is using the language of pure reason and logic, but he is driven by a divine command. He is the true believer in the room, and he is the one being charged with heresy. The absurdity is almost too much to bear. His entire defense is an explanation of this sacred duty. He is not apologizing. He is bearing witness. He is telling the story of the oracle not to impress them, but to make them understand that his actions are not his own. He is a servant. He has no choice but to be the annoying, questioning, stubborn man he is. It has been divinely mandated. To ask him to be otherwise is to ask him to betray his God. This is why he will not accept exile. What would he do in another city? Be silent? That would be disobedience. He would, of course, do the exact same thing in Thebes or Megara. He would begin questioning their leading citizens, and soon enough he would be driven out of there as well. His fate is inextricably tied to his mission. There is no escaping it. He must see it through to the end. And this trial is the end. He has followed the path laid out for him by the god, and it has led him to this wooden platform, facing a jury that is preparing to condemn him. His life's work, his quest to understand the oracle, has reached its logical.
The bronze discs have been counted. The verdict is in. By a margin that is unsettlingly narrow, the jury has found Socrates guilty. A low murmur fills the court. His accusers, Anytus and Anytus, allow themselves thin, triumphant smiles. His friends, Plato and Crito among them, look ashen-faced. And Socrates? He stands as he did before, unmoved, perhaps even intrigued. The first act of this tragedy is complete. Now the second begins, the penalty. The law of Athens dictates a grim procedure. The prosecution proposes a penalty, and the convicted man proposes a counter-penalty. The jury then votes again, choosing between the two. Anytus, emboldened by his victory, steps forward and formally proposes the penalty he has sought all along: death. The word hangs in the hot Athenian air, sharp and final. All eyes now turn to Socrates. This is his final chance, the off-ramp the city has provided for him. This is the moment for him to play the game, to show some semblance of remorse, to save his own life. The court expects a plea. They expect him to suggest a heavy fine which his wealthy friends would eagerly pay. They expect him to propose exile, a bitter but survivable fate. They expect, in short, for him to finally bend. The entire courtroom leans in. The 501 jurors, having asserted their power by convicting him, are now likely prepared to be merciful. They have made their point. They have defended the honor of the city. Now, if Socrates will only give them a reasonable alternative, a way out, they can choose it and go home feeling that justice has been served. All he has to do is admit defeat, propose a fitting punishment for his crimes, and this whole ugly affair can be over. The city is holding its breath.
waiting for the apology, waiting for the plea. Socrates, however, has no interest in what the city expects. He takes the floor once more, not as a broken man, but as a philosopher with one last glorious lesson to impart. He addresses the jury not as his judges, but as his students. He begins not with a plea, but with a logical assessment. The question, he says, is what does he deserve? What is the just and proper treatment for a man who has spent his entire life, at great personal cost, acting as the city's conscience? What is the appropriate penalty for Athens' greatest benefactor? He calmly recounts his life's work. He has neglected his own affairs, living in poverty in order to fulfill the divine mission given to him by the oracle. He has been the gadfly, stinging the great and lazy horse of Athens into a state of wakeful self-awareness. He has forced the city's most powerful men to examine their own souls, to care for virtue above wealth and reputation. He has, he argues, with impeccable logic, done nothing but good for the city of Athens. Therefore, a just penalty is out of question. What is required is a just reward. The jury shifts uncomfortably. They do not understand where this is going, but they sense it is not toward a plea for mercy. Socrates continues, his voice devoid of arrogance, yet full of an unshakable confidence. He asks them to consider what they give to their other great benefactors. What honor is bestowed upon a victorious general? What reward is given to an Olympic champion who brings glory to the city? He knows the answer, and he knows that they know it. He is setting a trap, and the entire jury is walking straight into it. Then he springs it, the culmination of a lifetime of defiance, the single most audacious and insulting proposal ever uttered in an Athenian court. They ask what I deserve, he announces, his voice ringing with a philosopher's clarity. I deserve a hero's reward, a seat at the Prytaneum. A wave of shock and disbelief washes over the courtroom. He has not proposed a fine. He has not proposed exile. He has proposed that he be given free meals for life at the public expense in the city's most sacred hall. To understand the magnitude of this insult, you must understand the Prytaneum. It is the city's heart. It is the building where the sacred flame of Athens burns. It is where foreign ambassadors are entertained, where great generals are celebrated, and where Olympic victories are honored with maintenance for life. It is the highest honor the city can bestow upon its most beloved heroes. And Socrates, a man they have just convicted of impiety and corrupting the youth, has just demanded it as his punishment. The reaction is instantaneous and explosive. The courtroom erupts. Any shred of sympathy the jury might have had for the old man evaporates in a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. They are stunned, they are scandalized, and most of all, they are profoundly insulted. He has not just refused to apologize, he has mocked their judgment, mocked their authority, and mocked the very concept of justice they believe they are serving. He has thrown their offer of mercy back in their faces. I saw him speaking with a friend later, a glint in his eye. They wanted a tearful apology. I gave them a demand for free food. Very diplomatic, don't you think? He chuckled. It did not go over well. This is perhaps the greatest understatement in the history of philosophy. It did not go over well at all. It was a calculated, philosophical act of suicide. He was deliberately enraging the jury to ensure they would vote for his death. He was demonstrating in real time the chasm between his assessment of his life's worth and theirs. He genuinely believed his service to Athens was worthy of the highest honor. By proposing it as his penalty, he was forcing them to confront the absurdity of their guilty verdict. He was holding up a mirror so they could see the grotesquerie of condemning a man for being a public benefactor. Of course, the jury did not see a philosophical point. They saw a sneering, arrogant old man who was openly contemptuous of their power. He had made them look like fools. He had treated their solemn legal proceeding as a joke. He had turned the penalty phase into the punchline with them as the butt of it. He had left them with no choice. To accept any lesser penalty now would be to validate his outrageous claim. After the uproar dies down, he seems to reconsider, though the damage is irrevocably done. He mentions that as a poor man he could perhaps afford a fine of 1 mina, a laughably small sum that is another subtle insult. At this point, his friends Plato, Crito, and others rush to intervene. They frantically whisper to him, and then he announces that his friends have guaranteed a much more substantial sum, 30 mina, a fine that might have saved his life had he proposed it first. But it is far too late. The offer of a fine now sounds like a condescending afterthought. He has already told them what he thinks he is worth. He has already made his grand, defiant gesture. The offer of money now seems cheap and insincere, a final twist of the knife. He has shown them his soul, and it is a soul that believes itself to be a hero, not a criminal. He has drawn a line in the sand and dared them to cross it. He dismisses exile with the same logical contempt. Why would he leave Athens only to inflict his philosophical interrogations on the citizens of another city? He would surely be driven out of there as well. Besides, he is 70 years old. He will not spend his final years wandering from city to city, a perpetual refugee from ignorance. He would rather die in his own city than live in silence elsewhere. He has masterfully and fatally sealed his own fate. Where the original vote for guilt was close, the coming vote on his penalty will not be. He has managed to unite the jury which was previously divided. He has angered those who voted to acquit him and solidified the resolve of those who voted to convict him. By proposing a reward, he has made the death penalty seem like the only appropriate response to his arrogance. More jurors will vote to execute him now than had voted him guilty in the first place. Think about that. He has actively persuaded his own jury to kill him. It is a stunning act of intellectual defiance. He is not a victim of the state. He is
The jury has returned. The final vote is cast. The air in the courtroom, already thick with resentment and confusion, becomes heavy with a dreadful finality. The herald clears his throat and announces the result. The counter-proposal of a fine has been rejected. The penalty proposed by the prosecution has been chosen. The sentence is death. By a margin far greater than the one that declared him guilty, Socrates has been condemned to drink the hemlock. His own audacious wit has turned a narrow conviction into a landslide execution. A collective gasp comes from the corner where his friends are gathered. Plato, Crito, Apollodorus. Their faces are masks of disbelief and horror. Anytus and his cohorts wear the grim, sober expressions of men who have gotten what they wanted, yet perhaps now feel the chilling weight of it. The 501 jurors begin to stir, avoiding eye contact, their brief moment of collective power now resolving back into individual men who must live with what they have done.
The city of Athens, in the year 399 before the Common Era, has sentenced its wisest man to die. In the center of this emotional storm stands Socrates, an island of impossible calm. There is no tremor in his hands, no fear in his eyes. He does not rail against the injustice or curse his accusers. He looks upon the men who have just condemned him not with anger, but with a kind of profound, unsettling pity. He has spent his life arguing that to commit an injustice is a far greater harm than to suffer one. In this moment, he believes it absolutely. He is the one being sent to his death, but they are the ones who have truly corrupted their souls. He is permitted to speak one last time. He turns first to those who voted against him, the men who now sentence him. He does not plead, nor does he rebuke. Instead, he offers them a prophecy, his voice even and steady. He tells them they are mistaken if they think that by killing him they can escape the scrutiny of their own lives. They have not solved their problem, they have merely created a vacuum. Younger, more vigorous critics will now rise up to take his place, and they will be far harsher and less gentle than he ever was. You have done this, he tells them, thinking that you will not have to give an account of your lives. But I say that the result will be the exact opposite. In their attempt to silence the gadfly, they have ensured that his buzzing will become an immortal echo. By making him a martyr, they have amplified his message beyond anything he could have achieved in a dozen more lifetimes. His death, he explains, without a trace of malice, will be their greatest folly. They have won the trial, but they have lost the argument for all eternity. Then he turns to those who voted for him, his friends, the men he calls his true judges. He offers them not condolences, but comfort. He shares with them a remarkable fact. Throughout this entire day, from the moment he left his home to this very second, his daimonion, that divine inner voice that always warns him when he is about to make a mistake, has been completely silent. It did not stop him from coming to court, it did not stop him from speaking as he did, and it did not warn him against his disastrous counter-proposal. He can only interpret this silence in one way. What has happened to him is not a tragedy. It is not an evil. It must, in some strange way, be for the good. His divine sign, his personal spiritual guide, has given its tacit approval to this entire proceeding, including its fatal conclusion. Therefore, he tells his weeping friends they should be of good cheer. They are not to fear death, for it seems his own God does not. This is not a defeat. It is the proper, divinely sanctioned end to his mission. He then begins to muse, to philosophize, one last time for his audience, on the nature of death itself. What is it that they are sentencing him to? No one knows, he says, so it is irrational to fear it. But one can speculate. It is either one of two things. The first possibility is that death is a profound and total annihilation, a dreamless sleep without end. If so, what a wonderful gain it would be, to be free from all cares, all pains, all duties, an eternity of perfect peace. He compares it to the single best night of uninterrupted rest a man could ever have. The second possibility, he continues, is that the stories are true, that death is not an end, but a journey, a migration of the soul from this world to another. If that is the case, then what an extraordinary adventure awaits him. to arrive in a place where the true judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, preside, to finally meet and converse with the great souls of the past, with Homer and Hesiod, with Odysseus and Agamemnon, to continue his work questioning the heroes of old to see which of them is truly wise. For a man who loves conversation, what could be a greater blessing? So he concludes, either death is a peaceful sleep, or it is a wonderful new opportunity for philosophy. In neither case is it something a good man should fear. The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die and you to live. Which is better, only the God knows. He has not just accepted his fate, he has reasoned it into a victory. He has philosophized his own execution into a desirable outcome. He holds no ill will. He asks his accusers and his jury to forgive them, just as he forgives them. They thought they were harming him, but since a good man cannot be harmed in life or in death, they have failed. Their injustice has only stained their own souls, not his. His only concern is for the truth, and the truth, he believes, is invulnerable. It is a staggering display of intellectual and spiritual grace in the face of death. He has one last simple request. He turns to his friends, to Crito in particular. He asks them to watch over his 3 sons as they grow up, and when they are old enough, he begs his friends to do for them what he has done for all of Athens. If his sons seem to care more for wealth or reputation than for virtue, his friends must pester them, question them, and reproach them for it. They must be subjected to the same annoying, soul-improving Socratic method. His legacy is not a property to be inherited, but a process to be continued. The guards approach him now. The court is adjourned. The crowd begins to disperse, some in anger, some in sorrow, some in a state of dazed confusion. Socrates will be led to the state prison, where he must await his final day. Due to a religious festival, the sacred embassy to Delos, there will be a delay. He will have days, perhaps weeks, to spend with his friends before the end. Time for more conversations, time to prepare. As he is led away, he is the most free man in the entire city. He is free from fear, free from bitterness, and free from the compromises of a life lived in defiance of one's own principles. His death sentence is not a conclusion imposed upon him, but the final, logical step of a life lived with absolute integrity. It is the perfect, if tragic, end to his story. I overheard him speaking to himself as he left the court, a wry philosophical summary of the whole affair. Guilty, and the sentence, hemlock, a bitter brew, they say. I see it as a final conversation, an end to the pain, but not to the truth, a rather elegant solution for a messy problem. The messy problem was the conflict between his unyielding quest for truth and a society that preferred comfortable lies. The hemlock resolves that conflict in the only way it could be resolved. The poisoned cup awaits him, but it holds no terror for him. For Socrates, it is not an instrument of punishment, but a tool of release.
The trial is a memory. The verdict is a fact of history. We are no longer in the chaos of the courthouse, but in the quiet stone confines of the Athenian state prison. Here Socrates awaits the return of the sacred ship from Delos, the event that will signal his final day. His friends are with him, their faces etched with a grief that is almost unbearable. They see a tragic end, a great injustice. Socrates, however, sees one last opportunity for a seminar. The topic, Why They and All of Us Are Fools to Fear What Comes Next. His friends, Crito in particular, are distraught. They cannot comprehend his serenity. How can he be so calm, so infuriatingly cheerful when the cup of hemlock is being prepared? Socrates looks at them, not with the condescension of a man who is braver than they, but with the gentle exasperation of a teacher whose students have missed the most fundamental point of the entire course. His final lecture is about to begin. It is a lesson on the irrationality of fear. He begins with a simple, devastating premise. To fear death, he argues, is to pretend to know what one does not know. It is the height of ignorance. Men fear death because they assume it is the greatest of all evils. But who has come back to give a report? Who has surveyed that distant country and returned with a map of its terrors? No one. Therefore, to fear it is to be guilty of the very crime Socrates has spent his life exposing, the arrogant pretense of wisdom. A truly wise man admits he does not know what death is, and therefore has no logical basis to fear it. The dark humor of the situation is profound. Here is a man, hours from his own state-sanctioned death, treating the primal terror of oblivion as if it were a simple logical fallacy. He is not offering emotional comfort or religious platitudes. He is offering a rigorous philosophical dissection of their sorrow, and concluding that it is based on sloppy thinking. He is in essence correcting his friend's intellectual homework as his final act of friendship. It is both magnificent and maddening. Having established that fearing the unknown is foolish, he proceeds to analyze the problem like a geometer studying a shape. What are the possibilities? What can death logically be? He presents his friends with a clean, simple dichotomy, a fork in the road of existence. Death, he posits, must be one of two things. There is no third option. This is the bedrock of his comfort, a rational framework for confronting the abyss. The first possibility is that death is a state of nothingness, a complete and total annihilation. It is, he says, like a sleep, but a sleep with no dreams, no consciousness, no awareness whatsoever. It is a final, absolute end to perception. For most, this is the very definition of terror. But Socrates, with a characteristic twist of logic, presents it as a wonderful blessing, a great gain. He asks his friends to think of the best, most peaceful night of sleep they have ever experienced, a night undisturbed by dreams or worries. Now, he asks them to imagine if all eternity were like that one perfect night. Would that not be an incredible gift? To be released from all the pains of the body, all the anxieties of the soul, all the endless troubles of life. To be in a state of perfect, uninterrupted peace? If death is nothingness, then it is nothing to fear. It is a release. The second possibility, he continues, his tone shifting from one of calm acceptance to one of genuine curiosity, is that the stories our poets tell are true. What if death is not an end, but a transition, a migration of the soul from this world to another place? If this is the case, he argues, then death is not a tragedy. It is the beginning of the greatest adventure a philosopher could ever imagine. It is a promotion. Imagine arriving in a true and just world, a place where the judges are not easily swayed Athenians, but the wise sons of Zeus, Minos and Rhadamanthus.
Imagine being able to finally meet and converse with the great heroes and poets of the past, to sit with Homer and Orpheus, to question Agamemnon about his command, and to cross-examine the wily Ulysses about his travels. For Socrates, a man whose entire life has been a search for enlightening conversation, this is not hell, this is paradise. He speaks of it with the excitement of a traveler planning a trip to a fascinating new land. His greatest joy in life has been questioning people to find out who is wise and who only pretends to be. In this other world, he can continue his work on a grander scale for all eternity. What greater happiness could there be? He can finally get to the bottom of things, unbothered by the mortal inconveniences of food, drink, or a jury that wants to kill him for being annoying. And so he lays out his final triumphant conclusion for his weeping friends. They believe death is an evil, he says, a faint, almost amused smile playing on his lips. I tell them they are foolish to fear what they do not know. It is either nothing or it is everything, and either way it is an opportunity for more questions, a final, beautiful adventure. Don't you think? He has logically reasoned his own death into a win-win scenario. Either he gets eternal peace or he gets an eternal seminar. For a philosopher, there is no downside. This argument is the capstone of his entire ethical framework. At the core of his philosophy is the belief that a good man, one whose soul is ordered by reason and virtue, cannot be harmed either in life or in death. The only true harm is injustice, for it damages the soul, the most precious part of a person. His accusers, by committing this injustice, have harmed themselves immeasurably. He, the victim, remains unharmed. His body can be killed, yes, but his soul, his true self, is beyond their reach. If death is nothingness, his soul ceases to be, and thus cannot suffer. If death is a journey, his soul is liberated to a better and more just place. His physical execution is, from his perspective, an irrelevant detail. It is a trivial wound compared to the mortal injury his condemners have inflicted upon their own character. This is his final victory, a triumph of philosophy over brute force. He is not just offering a hypothetical argument, he is living it. His serenity in this prison cell is the proof of his philosophy. It is the demonstration that an examined life leads to a fearless death. He has so thoroughly convinced himself of his own logic that he can face the end of his existence with the same equanimity with which he would face a mathematical problem. It is a breathtaking display of the power of reason. His friends are beginning to understand. Their tears are subsiding, replaced by a sense of awe. They are witnessing their master's final and most profound lesson. He is not just telling them not to fear death, he is showing them how. He is transforming this grim, squalid prison into a classroom, and his own death into the ultimate teaching aid. His argument is elegant, simple, and for him, completely irrefutable. It disarms death of all its terror. It turns the king of fears into a logical puzzle with two equally acceptable solutions. He has faced every challenge in his life with reason as his only weapon, and he is now facing the final challenge in the exact same way. It is a testament to a life lived with unwavering consistency. He is not afraid because, in his mind, there is nothing to be afraid of. The cup of hemlock is not a vessel of poison. It is either a sleeping draught that will grant him eternal rest, or it is a ticket to the most exclusive philosophical conference in the history of the universe.
He is at peace because he has reduced the greatest of all human terrors to a simple choice, a wonderful peace or a wonderful conversation. This is the comfort of philosophy, not a soft, sentimental assurance that everything will be all right, but a hard, rational conviction that even the worst possible outcome is not a true evil. It is the comfort that comes from a life spent in pursuit of clarity, a clarity so powerful that it can stare into the abyss and not flinch. Socrates has looked.
We are in the final hours. The sun of Athens filters through the high window of the prison, casting long shadows on the stone floor. The air is thick with the sorrow of his followers. They are here, the men whom Athens has condemned as the corrupted youth. Crito, ever loyal, sits beside him, his face a mask of grief. The young Plato is here, his brilliant mind frantically trying to process a world without his master. They weep not just for the man, but for what they believe is the end of his mission. They think the light of philosophy is about to be extinguished. Socrates, ever the contrarian, finds their grief misplaced. He sees their tears and offers not a shared sorrow, but a gentle, almost amused correction. They are weeping for the wrong person. His journey is nearly over, a problem neatly and logically solved. Theirs, however, is just beginning. He has spent years leading them down a path of inquiry, and now he is about to vanish, leaving them alone in a dark forest of questions, with only a flickering candle of reason to guide them. Their real troubles are yet to come. Let us revisit that famous charge, the one that has led us here, corrupting the youth. His accusers, Anytus and Miletus, believe they have won. They have convicted him of this crime and are about to administer the punishment. The delicious, tragic irony is that they are right. He has corrupted these young men, just not in the way they imagine. He has utterly and irrevocably corrupted their ability to live a simple, unthinking life. He has ruined them for a world of comfortable falsehoods. He has not taught them to disrespect the gods. He has taught them to question what piety truly is. He has not taught them to be criminals. He has taught them to question what justice truly is. He has infected them with the incurable disease of critical thought. They can no longer hear a politician's speech without dissecting its premises. They can no longer accept a tradition without examining its foundation. He has, in essence, switched on a light in their minds that can never again be switched off, and they will now be forced to see the dust and cobwebs in every corner of their society. I heard his quiet reflection on this very matter, a thought directed at his weeping friends. My students, they worry for me. They should not. They should worry for themselves. He sees their future with a terrifying clarity. They believe they are losing a teacher, but he knows he is leaving behind a cadre of unwilling apostles. I have taught them to question, to doubt, to think, and now they are the ones who must carry the burden of truth, a very dangerous inheritance that. He has not given them a set of beliefs to comfort them. He has given them a method that will torment them. Look at them. Look at this generation he has supposedly ruined. There is Plato, a young man of noble birth and poetic soul. Socrates has taken his raw genius and honed it into a weapon of inquiry. He has burdened Plato with the immense task of being his memory, of capturing these fleeting dialogues in writing so they might live forever. He has given Plato the tools to build entire worlds out of pure reason, a task that will consume his life and set him apart from all other men. There is Xenophon, the practical man, the soldier. He is not here today, being away on his military campaigns. But Socrates has armed him with more than a sword. He has taught Xenophon that the greatest battle is for self-mastery, that true leadership comes from an examined life. Xenophon will carry Socratic ideals onto the battlefield and into the writing of history, forever changing how we think about the relationship between wisdom and action. And there is Crito, his oldest and dearest friend, a good, simple, and wealthy man. Crito may not grasp the highest flights of philosophy, but he understands loyalty and love. His presence here is a testament to the fact that Socrates' corruption was not merely an intellectual exercise. It was a deeply human one. He taught men not just how to think, but how to be better friends, better citizens, and better souls, even if the city itself disagreed. The great miscalculation of his accusers was this: they thought Socrates was a man. They believed by killing the man they could kill the ideas. They failed to understand that Socrates had transformed himself into a virus. He was patient zero, and he has spent decades ensuring his own transmissibility. Now the carriers of this intellectual contagion are seated right here in this room, and soon they will disperse. The state thought it was performing a clean surgical execution. In reality, it was breaking a flask of plague in the middle of the city. These young men will now go forth from Athens. They will travel to Sicily, to Egypt, to the coasts of Ionia. And everywhere they go, they will start arguments. They will ask them their annoying questions. They will found their own schools. They will corrupt a whole new generation. The state has not contained the Socratic method. It has universalized it. Consider what he means by a dangerous inheritance. The burden of truth is not a light one. To live the Socratic life is to be a permanent outsider. It is to be the one person at the dinner party who asks what courage really is, just as everyone is enjoying their wine. It means being forever at odds with power, because power relies on unexamined assumptions. It is a life of intellectual loneliness, punctuated by moments of startling clarity. He has not left them a map. He has left them a compass that always points toward their own ignorance. He has not left them an inheritance of wealth or property, which would have made their lives easy. He has left them an inheritance of doubt and inquiry, which will make their lives immeasurably more difficult. They will be viewed with suspicion by every authority figure they meet. He has, in a way, condemned them to live a life much like his own. No wonder he pities them. It is the final Socratic paradox. He always insisted he was not a teacher, for he had no knowledge to impart. Now we can see the truth in that claim. He did not give his students facts to memorize. He gave them a method for dismantling falsehoods. He did not build a philosophical system for them to inhabit. He taught them how to demolish the foundations of every philosophical system they encountered, including their own. His legacy is not a doctrine, but a process. It is not a noun, but a verb. To be Socratic is not to believe what Socrates believed, but to question as Socrates questioned. This is why his legacy is indestructible. You can burn books that contain doctrines. You can outlaw schools that teach systems. But you cannot kill a way of thinking. You cannot legislate against the question mark. The men who accused him of corrupting the youth were concerned that he was teaching their sons to be disobedient. But he was teaching them something far more fundamental. He was teaching them to be disobedient to their own lazy, unthinking minds. The outer rebellion they feared was merely a symptom of a much deeper inner revolution. Plato will now go on to found his academy, a place where the Socratic method will be preserved and expanded for centuries. The questions first asked in the Athenian agora will echo in the groves of academe, debated by generations of students who will never meet the man but will be forever in his debt. This is the true continuation. This is the real immortality. His accusers thought they were saving Athens from Socrates. The beautiful irony is that Socrates, through his students, will go on to save the entire Western world from the slumber of an unexamined life. His corruption is the seed of our entire intellectual tradition. He has lost his life, but he has won the future. The weeping in the cell begins to subside, replaced by a somber.
The trial is over. The arguments have been made. The votes have been cast. The sentence has been passed. Socrates, the gadfly of Athens, is to be put to death. As he stands before the court for the last time, he is no longer a defendant. He is a prophet. The final words he offers are not a plea or a lament, but a chilling and unforgettable warning to the city that has condemned him. He is about to diagnose the fatal disease that has taken root in the soul of Athens, and to pronounce the unforgivable sin for which it will be judged by all of history. He looks out at the faces of the 501 men who have just decided his fate. They believe they have triumphed. They believe they have exercised their power to remove a troublesome element from their society. Socrates, with a clarity that is almost terrifying, proceeds to explain to them how profoundly they have miscalculated. He begins with a statement that turns the entire concept of punishment on its head. "You will not harm me, citizens," he says, his voice calm and even. "You will only harm yourselves." For Socrates, this is not a clever rhetorical trick. It is a fundamental truth. The only real harm that can befall a person is damage to their soul. And the only way to damage one's soul is by committing an act of injustice. They, his jurors, have just committed a grave injustice. They have allowed themselves to be swayed by rhetoric and personal vendetta to condemn an innocent man. In doing so, they have inflicted a wound upon their own character, a stain upon their own souls from which they may never recover. He, the victim, remains untouched, for his soul is clear. He who has lived a life in pursuit of virtue cannot be harmed by their verdict. Death, as he has already proven to his own satisfaction, is not an evil. It is either a peaceful nothingness or a blessed continuation. But an act of injustice, that is a true and lasting evil, one that resides in the perpetrator, not the victim. The hemlock will poison his body, but their verdict has already poisoned their city. Their act of revenge has backfired spectacularly. The intended target is immune, and the poison has been consumed by the ones who administered it. Then he reminds them of his purpose. The
the divine mission he has carried out for decades. He was not an enemy of the state, he was its most devoted, if most irritating servant. By killing me, he warns, you are killing a man who forces you to be better, a voice that forces you to be true. He was the city's conscience. He was the nagging voice of reason that prevented the comfortable slumber of hypocrisy from becoming a permanent coma. He was the quality inspector for the Athenian soul, and he found defects everywhere. His questioning, which they found so annoying, was a form of civic therapy. He forced politicians to confront the emptiness of their slogans, poets to confront the meaninglessness of their verses, and citizens to confront the contradictions in their own lives. He did not do this to mock them, but to improve them. He was the bitter medicine that could have cured the city of its arrogance, and the city has just voted to spit that medicine out and kill the doctor. And what will happen now? What will Athens be like without its gadfly? Here his warning descends into a bleak and chilling prophecy. And soon that voice will be gone, and your ignorance will be undisturbed. And that, my friends, is a tragedy. He paints a picture of their future, a future they have chosen, a future of silence. The uncomfortable questions will cease. The public square will be filled with the confident pronouncements of ignorant men with no one to challenge them. The city will congratulate itself on its newfound peace and unity, but it will be the peace of a stagnant pond. It will be the unity of the graveyard. Without the constant challenge of his questions, the intellectual and moral muscles of Athens will atrophy. The pursuit of wealth and power will proceed without the inconvenient nagging about the state of one's soul. They have not sentenced him to death, they have sentenced themselves to a life of unexamined mediocrity. That, for Socrates, is a fate far worse than hemlock. But his prophecy contains another, sharper threat. He warns them that they have not solved their problem, but multiplied it. He, an old and patient man, has been gentle with them. But now, having tasted the blood of a philosopher, they will have to contend with his followers. A whole generation of young men whom he has taught to question everything will be enraged by this injustice. They will rise up to take his place, but they will not have his patience or his gentle irony. You will have more critics than you had before, whom I was restraining, and you did not notice. In their desire to be free from criticism, they have guaranteed an explosion of it. They have killed the shepherd, and now the angry young wolves will descend upon the flock. Their single act of suppression will unleash a wave of dissent far greater than anything Socrates himself could have managed. Their attempt to secure their authority will lead directly to its erosion. Here we find the unforgivable sin. It is not the specific act of killing an old man, it is the principle behind it. The unforgivable sin that Athens has committed this day, in the year 399 before the Common Era, is the deliberate choice of ignorance over wisdom. It is the conscious decision to murder a man because his questions were becoming too uncomfortable. It is the state-sanctioned execution of the city's own conscience. Athens had always prided itself on its freedom of speech, its love of reason, its democratic ideals. This trial has exposed that pride as a hollow sham. when confronted with a man who truly embodied those ideals, who took them to their logical and uncomfortable conclusions, the city flinched. It chose comfort over truth. It chose the familiar darkness of prejudice over the harsh, illuminating light of philosophy. This is a betrayal of everything the city claimed to stand for. This single act will become the defining stain on the legacy of Athens, the city of Pericles, the cradle of democracy, the cultural center of the world will henceforth and forever be known as the city that killed Socrates. Every achievement will be weighed against this one monumental failure. Every boast of freedom and reason will be met with the cynical reply, "But what did you do to your wisest citizen?" They have secured a temporary peace at the cost of their eternal reputation. They believe they are asserting the power of the many over the one, but history will see it as the fearful tyranny of the crowd over a single, courageous mind. They believe they are defending their traditions and their gods, but history will see it as the desperate lashing out of an insecure establishment against a man who dared to suggest they could be better. They have made him immortal, not as an Athenian hero, but as the world's first and greatest martyr for the cause of free thought. As he is led away, his final warning hangs in the air like a curse. He has held up a mirror to the city, and the city, horrified by its own reflection, has chosen to smash the mirror. But the image remains, seared into the memory of all who have witnessed it. The image of a city that, when given a choice between a comfortable lie and a difficult truth, chose the lie and murdered the truth-teller. Socrates is at peace. He has lived a just life and will die an honest death. He is reconciled with his philosophy and his God. But Athens is now at war with itself. It has committed the unforgivable sin of choosing to be less than it could be. It has silenced the voice.
As our broadcast from the year 399 before the Common Era draws to a close, we must look beyond the fate of a single man. The trial of Socrates is over. The cup of hemlock is being prepared, but the true verdict of this day is not upon Socrates. It is upon the city of Athens, and upon the very ideal of democracy it purports to champion. What we have witnessed is more than a legal tragedy. It is a political catastrophe, a failed experiment whose grim results will echo for all time. Athens, the cradle of democracy, the city that expelled tyrants and placed power in the hands of the people, has now used that power to commit a tyrannical act. The great promise of the Athenian system was that it would prevent the arbitrary rule of a single will. It was meant to be a bulwark against the kind of capricious injustice that defines the reign of kings and oligarchs. Yet today, that bulwark has crumbled, not from without, but from within. The people themselves have become the tyrant. The system designed to protect the city from the whims of a monarch has proven to have no defense against the passions of a mob. The jury of 501, in its collective might, has demonstrated that a majority can be just as blind, just as vindictive, and just as deaf to reason as any singular despot. They have taken the sacred power of the demos and used it to silence a dissenting voice, not because it was dangerous, but because it was annoying. This is the terrifying paradox of a democracy unmoored from virtue. As I reflect on these events, a quote I overheard from a distraught philosopher in the crowd comes to mind. "This verdict is not the death of one man," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of grief and horrified clarity. "It is the death of an ideal.
The ideal that has perished today is the naive and hopeful belief that the voice of the people is the voice of God, that the will of the majority is inherently righteous. That ideal now lies dead on the floor of the Dicasterion alongside justice and reason. The philosopher continued, his words forming the epitaph for this entire affair, that a majority, even when wrong, can condemn the truth. This is the core of the catastrophe. The Athenians have treated truth as if it were a political office, something that can be decided by a show of hands. Socrates presented them with a logical argument. They countered it with a vote. They have committed a fundamental category error, and the cost of that error is the life of their best citizen. Socrates was the ultimate stress test for a free society. He possessed no army, sought no political office, and threatened no one with physical harm. His only weapon was a question. His only crime was a relentless dedication to self-critique, a standard he applied to himself and everyone around him. A healthy political body, like a healthy individual, must not only tolerate criticism, but welcome it as a necessary condition for improvement. Athens has just revealed itself to be terminally ill. The city's reaction to Socrates is the reaction of a deeply insecure patient who kills their doctor for diagnosing a disease. The city could not bear to have its flaws pointed out, its cherished beliefs questioned, its leaders' ignorance exposed. The democracy of Athens, for all its celebrated tolerance, proved too brittle to endure the persistent inquiries of one honest man. Its vanity was more powerful than its principles. This is the grim lesson that the trial of Socrates offers to all future generations. It is a permanent and chilling case study in the pathologies of democratic life. It is a lesson for all future ages, the philosopher concluded, a very grim one and a very inconvenient one. The inconvenient truth is that democracy is not a magical solution to the problem of human government. It is merely a different arena for the eternal struggle between wisdom and ignorance, courage and fear, reason and passion. The lesson is this: the majority can be wrong. A crowd can be whipped into a frenzy of fear and hatred. The mechanisms of popular justice can be hijacked by personal vendettas and political maneuvering. And a society that prides itself on freedom can, in a moment of collective panic, become the agent of its own intellectual extinction. This is the ghost that will haunt every democracy to come. Socrates' fate is a warning written in hemlock. What we have seen here is the formal divorce of political power from philosophical truth. Before this trial, it might have been possible to believe that the two could coexist, that a city could be both powerful and wise. Socrates himself believed this was possible. It is why he spent his life trying to improve the souls of his fellow citizens. This verdict is the city's official reply to his efforts. The city has declared that it prefers power to wisdom. Henceforth, the philosopher and the politician will walk separate paths. Philosophy will grow more suspicious of the state, more wary of the passions of the crowd, and the state will grow more suspicious of the philosopher, more fearful of the man who cannot be bought and whose questions undermine authority. This trial has created a wound between truth and power that may never fully heal. The great irony is that the Athenians have destroyed their own ideal in the name of preserving it. They voted to kill Socrates to protect their way of life, to defend their traditions, to safeguard their children. But the core of the Athenian ideal was the freedom to inquire, the courage to debate, the radical belief that reason, not force, should guide human affairs. By killing Socrates, they have betrayed every one of these principles. Their act of self-defense was in fact an act of self-harm. They have shown the world that their commitment to free speech ends precisely at the point where that speech becomes challenging or uncomfortable. They have demonstrated that their democracy is a fair-weather system, unable to survive the storm of a single persistent questioner. Their victory is a moral suicide. This is the legacy of the year 399 before the Common Era. It is the year that Athens, the school of Hellas, chose to become a dunce. It is the year a city famed for its wisdom committed a profound stupidity. It is the year the world learned that the tyranny of the majority can be just as ruthless and far more self-righteous than the tyranny of any king. The broadcast is ending. The story is told. Socrates awaits his final conversation in his cell, at peace with himself. But the city of Athens is now condemned to live with itself, to live with the silence where his questions used to be. It is a silence that will be filled only by the echoes of its own unexamined prejudices. They have won their peace. May they enjoy it. It is the peace of the dead. We leave you with this final thought. The trial of Socrates is not a story about the past. It is a perpetual warning for the future. It is a reminder that the most dangerous threat to any free society is not the man who asks difficult questions, but the chorus of voices that demands he be silenced. The fate of every civilization can be measured by how it treats its critics. Athens has just failed the test. Keep the chilling lessons coming. Like and subscribe.
The sun is setting on Athens, and on the life of its most famous philosopher. Here, in the cold state prison, the final scene of this long tragedy is unfolding. The legal arguments are memories. The political machinations have borne their bitter fruit. All that remains is the man, his weeping friends, and the inexorable approach of the executioner. The mood is thick with a sorrow so profound it feels like a physical weight. Yet Socrates himself seems to be the lightest thing in the room, his spirit unburdened by the fate of his body. He has spent his last hours in the most Socratic way imaginable, in conversation. He has been talking with his closest followers about the nature of the soul, arguing with methodical calm that the soul is immortal, and that a true philosopher, who has spent his life detaching his soul from the needs and passions of the body, has in fact been practicing for death all along. For him, this is not an execution, it is a graduation, the final separation of the rational soul from its fleshy prison. It is the ultimate philosophical act. His friends, however, are not so easily convinced by logic. They are about to lose their master, their mentor, their friend. Apollodorus, a man of great passion, is wailing uncontrollably. Crito, his oldest friend, sits in stunned silence, his face a portrait of grief. Socrates has to comfort the very men who have come to comfort him, a final, absurd reversal. He is a host calming his distraught guests at his own farewell party, a party for which he is the only refreshment. The prison official, a servant of the state, enters the cell. He is not a villain, but a man doing his job, and he does so with a heavy heart. He has come to know Socrates during his imprisonment, and openly weeps as he gives the final instructions. He tells Socrates that he considers him the noblest, gentlest, and best of all who have ever come to this place. He turns away, unable to watch, and leaves the room. Even the state, in its final interaction, seems to be apologizing. Socrates watches him go and turns to his friends. "How charming the man is," he says, with no trace of irony. He then asks for the cup. He is ready. Crito tries to delay, telling him that the sun is not yet fully set, that other men in his position take their time, eating and drinking a final meal. Socrates dismisses this gently. There is no point in clinging to a life that is already forfeit. To do so would be to make himself ridiculous in his own eyes. He has lived by reason, and he will die by reason, on schedule. The cup is brought, a small earthenware vessel containing the crushed hemlock, a potion that will paralyze his body from the extremities inward. This is the moment. The physical reality of his sentence is here, in his hands. His friends can no longer contain their grief. A wave of sobbing breaks across the room, started by Apollodorus and quickly engulfing them all. The stoic composure they had struggled to maintain is shattered. Socrates alone remains serene. He looks at them, not with anger, but with a teacher's firm disappointment. "What is this strange outcry?" he asks. "I sent the women away mainly so that they would not misbehave in this way, for I have heard that a man should die in a tranquil state." He is chiding them. Their emotional display is unseemly, unphilosophical. He is trying to conduct a final experiment, and their tears are contaminating the results. It is the darkest, most beautiful piece of comedy imaginable. He takes the cup from the servant. I can almost hear his internal monologue, a final, wry observation on the proceedings. "The cup is here. My friends weep. I do not. It is simply a tool, like a hammer, a tool to end a debate that had grown tiresome. He holds the instrument of his own death and sees it not as an agent of tragedy, but as a simple mechanism, a solution to a problem. Without a tremor, without a hint of fear, he raises the cup to his lips. He says a brief prayer to the gods, another jab at the charge of impiety, asking them to grant him a fortunate journey from this world to the next. And then, calmly and cheerfully, he drinks the poison down, draining the cup completely. The room falls into horrified silence, broken only by the muffled sounds of his friends trying to choke back their sobs. He follows the executioner's instructions to the letter. He begins to walk around the cell, a final peripatetic lecture. He is walking, talking, and dying all at the same time. His friends watch, mesmerized, as their master turns his own death into a final ambulatory lesson in courage. He continues his walk until his legs begin to feel heavy as the poison begins its work. "It's time," he says simply, and lies down on the cot as instructed. The numbness is spreading. The executioner, who has returned, examines his feet and legs, pinching them and asking Socrates if he can feel it. Socrates says no. The man explains that when the coldness reaches his heart, he will be gone. He is dying from the ground up, a slow, methodical erasure of the physical self, and he is a detached, curious observer of the entire process. The chill is creeping up his body. He is covered with a cloth, but just before the end he uncovers his face for one last cryptic command. He looks at his oldest friend. "Crito," he says, his voice now weak, "we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt." These are his final words, a strange, almost nonsensical request. What could it mean? Asclepius is the god of healing. One traditionally offers a sacrifice to him upon being cured of a disease. Is Socrates suggesting that life itself is the disease, and that death is the cure? Is it a final ironic joke, a parting riddle for his friends to puzzle over for the rest of their lives? We will never know for certain. It is his last perfect act of Socratic irony.
Crito asks if there is anything else. There is no reply. A moment later, there is a slight shudder, and then stillness. The executioner uncovers his face. His eyes are fixed. The gadfly of Athens is dead. The voice that for 50 years had questioned, prodded, and annoyed the city into thinking is finally silent. The great experiment is over. Socrates has shown, with his own life as the final proof, that a man whose soul is in order has nothing to fear from the world. He has lived his philosophy, and now he has died his philosophy. There is no distinction between the man and his ideas. They are one and the same, a perfect, unbreakable whole. The city of Athens has killed its conscience. It has murdered the man who loved it most because he refused to flatter it. But in doing so, they have granted him the one thing he never sought, but so richly deserved: immortality. His story, his questions, his courage, and his final magnificent death will now echo for all time, a permanent challenge to every generation. Our broadcast from the past is at an end. We have witnessed a monumental finality, the death of a man and the birth of an eternal legend. The hemlock has done its work, but the questions of Socrates have only just begun to spread. They are with us now, in this room, in our own minds, waiting for an answer. If you're still processing this monumental finality, be sure to subscribe.
The static grows louder now, a sound like the rushing of a distant sea, threatening to overwhelm this fragile broadcast. The noises of the city, the shouts from the agora, the sounds of life in Athens in the year 399 before the Common Era are fading into a low hum. A single mournful flute begins to play, a lonely melody against the encroaching silence. The voice you hear now is a whisper, the last embers of a fire, yet it carries with it a final, unshakable serenity. The hemlock is a patient and methodical teacher, and its lesson is nearly complete. And so, as the hemlock does its work, and my mortal body fades, this has been Socrates, your humble and soon-to-be dead broadcaster from the graveyard of an Athenian ideal. We have journeyed together through the farce of a trial, the absurdity of the accusations, and the pathetic, predictable anger of small men with large egos. We have stood before a jury of my peers and found them to be, sadly, just that. They are men, and they have acted as men do when confronted with a truth that makes them uncomfortable. They have chosen to kill it. We saw the injustice, felt the hypocrisy, and bore witness to the simple, undeniable truth that truth is worth dying for. To live a life built on unexamined beliefs, on borrowed virtues and inherited prejudices is not to live at all. It is merely to exist, a sleepwalker stumbling from one shadow to the next. To be jolted awake, to be forced to account for one's own soul, is the beginning of true life. My life, by that measure, has been a full one, though by the city's measure it is now at its end. If this desperate, darkly humorous transmission from the very heart of a philosophical martyrdom has given you a moment of profound contemplation, or perhaps made you appreciate your own era's freedom of thought, then my purpose is served. I hope you have seen that the charges of impiety and corruption were but masks for a deeper fear, the fear of self-doubt. The men of Athens did not fear that I would lead their sons away from the gods. They feared I would lead their sons to question whether their fathers had any idea what the gods truly wanted.
Perhaps this broadcast, this strange echo across the ages, has prompted you to look at your own leaders, your own certainties, with a fresh and skeptical eye. Perhaps you have been reminded that the majority is not always right, and that the loudest voice is rarely the wisest. If my fate has served as a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that no society is immune to the tyranny of its own ignorance, then this end is not an end at all. It is a lesson, a very long and very painful lesson. My friends weep around me, their faces a blur. I have asked them to be calm, for a philosopher should meet his end in peace. Their sorrow is for the man they see before them, this shell of flesh and bone that the poison is now claiming. But they should not weep for me. They should weep for Athens. Athens has lost not a citizen, but a mirror. And now the city will be free to admire its own reflection without the distraction of its flaws. A comforting thought for them, a tragic one for the truth. So I turn to you, you who are listening in a time I cannot imagine. My final request is not for mourning, but for continuation. The task I was given, the divine mission of the gadfly, does not die with me. It is now passed to all who value reason. Keep listening, keep questioning, and for the sake of all that is good and true, keep that subscribe button pressed. Let that act be your vote against the silence, your stand against the mob. It is the modern equivalent of casting a ballot for acquittal, a small but meaningful gesture that says you believe the examined life is indeed worth living. Because even when a man is silenced, the questions he asks and the ideas he plants can never be killed. They are seeds cast on the wind. They will land in fertile minds in future generations, and they will grow into new forests of inquiry. My accusers thought they were cutting down a single, troublesome tree. They were fools. They were standing in an orchard of their own making, and my death is merely the act of shaking the branches. The harvest will be plentiful, and it will be theirs to endure. Until the next broadcast, from a different, perhaps more enlightened realm, farewell, my friends.